Welcome to Wild Wacky Wonderful Humans, where real stories and the beautiful mess of being human is celebrated. We dive into real, raw, heart-led conversations with people who dare to be vulnerable, curious, and beautifully human. You'll hear stories that remind you that you're not alone. Your voice matters, and it's okay to be a walking contradiction, because that's what makes us human. Welcome back. Today's episode is deeply human, it's thoughtful, and it's so timely. I'm joined by Jenna Davey-Burns. She's a community leader, a foster carer, she's a former mayor and councillor, and she's very, very passionate about prevention over punishment, early intervention in families and communities, and she's done some incredible work in that world. We recorded this conversation in our home studios, and she's got a beautiful baby Cora with her. Just so incredible. It's so wonderful watching mums and bubs together and their beautiful bond that they have. You might hear some gurgles and some little murmurs and some beautiful baby speak. We'll have some pauses, so just embrace it and know that you're in the presence of a beautiful young baby. We explore the idea that behaviour is a form of communication and what changes when we respond with curiosity instead of reaction. We talk about how listening can shift outcomes, and what I love most about this conversation was how practical and grounded it was. Jenna's got a really incredible way of speaking about massive, complex issues in a way that just brings them back to a deep understanding. You feel it in your body, you feel it in your nervous system. It feels like it's just an everyday conversation. The part that really hit me most was our discussion around co-regulation and how the same principles that we use with children apply just as powerfully in leadership, in conflict, in community. It's a really powerful concept. And it felt like one of those conversations that gently but firmly asks us to slow down, listen better, show up differently. This episode isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking better questions. It's about staying human and remembering that prevention, presence, and care can change everything. So take a breath, settle in, and join me for this very powerful conversation. Welcome back to Wild Wacky Wonderful Humans. I have an absolutely incredible woman here with me today, Jenna Davey-Burns, JDB. Jenna Davey-Burns is a passionate community leader, a foster carer, an advocate for gender equality and human rights, a former mayor and councillor for the City of Kingston. Jenna has dedicated her life to creating more inclusive, compassionate communities. Incredible, what we need more of right now. Her background spans work in family violence prevention.
Yeah.
Prevention?
Yeah, I think prevention.
Both?
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably good to think of it as both.
Yeah.
There's a whole spectrum of work we could get
Wow.
into. But
Yeah, it'd be really interesting.
Yeah.
The need for that at the moment too, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And the care around it.
Yeah, there's a lot we could unpack there actually. And it's sort of
Yeah.
a really holistic issue that intersects with a lot of issues that we're seeing in the community at the moment. But anyway, I don't want to...
Yeah, definitely. So we'll dive into that. There's so many things to dive into. I'm only quarter of the way there. She's worked in international development, local leadership, including collaborations with the United Nations in Bangkok.
Yeah.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah, it was a great time.
Recovery projects following the Black Saturday bushfires. Holds a Master's in International Politics and a Bachelor of Arts in Criminology and Gender Studies.
Yeah.
Wow.
So interesting.
That's cool. I love that. I've always been intrigued by criminology.
That's a really fascinating subject.
Yeah, wow. I've teetered on doing my Master's in criminology and neurobiology.
Oh, wow.
So I'm really interested in the mind of violent offenders.
Yeah, okay.
Because I understand the mind at such a depth that I know that there's possibility to help resolve the problem.
Make changes. Yeah, I'd love to chat a bit more about brain development actually, like through foster care and some of the changes that are being proposed by the state government at the moment around young people.
Positive changes?
I think it just depends on your perspective. I certainly see them as changes that will probably have a very detrimental impact on young people. But anyway,
we can definitely
we'll dive into that one.
Yeah, for sure. So that was at the University of Melbourne. Jenna also mentors emerging leaders through Pathways to Politics and the Australian Local Government Women's Association.
Yeah, it's my way of giving back. Had awesome. A lot of help along my way, so wherever I can, I feel like it's helpful to give it back as well.
That's so important, especially right now. A lot of young people are really lost.
Yeah.
There's almost too much choice in a way, and then there's no choice.
Very overwhelming. And I think there's a sense of disempowerment as well for young people.
So mentorship is really important. So Jenna's doing that as well. Through her work in public service, foster care, Jenna embodies what it means to lead with both heart and purpose.
Oh, thank you.
You are the epitome of that, Jenna, and I'm so privileged and honoured to have you on Wild Wacky Wonderful Humans.
Thank you.
Where we celebrate humans, us just doing the best we can do as humans. And for us, our listeners, we can only do what we can do. We can only do what we know is right for us and our communities. And often we don't know what that is.
Yeah.
And then that causes the overwhelm. And so we need leaders, we need people who step up and shine a light for other people to, first of all, know what to do, and then secondly, know how to do it, how to step into that. So thank you for all of the work that you're doing in that space. It's incredible.
I think the work you're doing in telling people's stories and helping them share those stories is very powerful. And leading with heart takes that sort of vulnerability and courage, that intersection of those two. And when you help people share their stories, I think, as you said earlier, it helps inspire others to know that they too can step into that space of the heart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's such a key thing at the moment, especially right now when people are feeling so lost.
And divided, I think, is what I'm seeing a lot of. And one of the things that I really strongly focus on in my leadership. Hello.
And we have another guest with us today.
Little Cora's here
Baby
as well.
Cora is joining us here today.
Darling,
Absolutely
nice to see you. I worry about the division that we see, and that if we focus on leading with the heart and sharing from the heart, it brings people closer together, because we don't always have to agree on things. But I think the big thing is that we need to be collaborative and work together on finding solutions for the community.
So have you been in, I'm imagining you've been in situations, given that you've been the Mayor of Kingston.
Yeah.
And just to give people perspective, Kingston we're in Melbourne, Australia. So did you have situations then where you said you don't have to agree with it, but it's important to understand it and to see both sides and to be able to come to, I guess, a communal decision? How have you dealt with that?
I think that I draw on some of the work that I did a really long time ago. It was just a 1 or 2 day course, very long time ago, I think back in 2011, called Deep Democracy. And it's a model that came out of South Africa post-apartheid to bring communities back together and create mechanisms for discussion around breaking down racial segregation and discrimination. I'm not sure how effective it has been in the long run, but I certainly found the techniques helpful for me in the work that I've been doing.
Do you remember any?
There's a range of them, and one of them is, and they're very practical, they're very embodied, so a lot of the work that you do is on your feet. So one of the examples I loved, and we did this at a town hall once, I think it was in North Melbourne, there's probably about 50 or 60 people in the room, and you had to vote with your feet. So they'd call an issue. How do you feel about this? If you feel this, here's the line. If you feel strongly, you go to the end of the line. If you feel strongly against, you go to the other end. And you'd watch people sort of place themselves on this spectrum of decision-making.
Wow, that's
Those who had the most people won that debate. But it's what happened next that fascinated me. You then turn to those who lost the debate, who were on the other side and didn't have the numbers to win that particular issue, and say, what would it take to get you to yes? We then discuss what those matters were, and the group would then decide, are those compromises or additions that we'd be willing to make? And then you might move further towards a majority of people actually being part of that decision-making. And I thought it was a really effective model, and one that I think I'd like to see more of. One of the other things that I found really fascinating was we'd have to imagine we'd be divided into groups of 2 with a line through the middle, and one side would be blue, one side would be red. And we would have to stand there and find, say on an issue, things that were blue in people who were red. People on the blue side would have to find things that were red in them, and then you'd have to swap over. Yeah, activities of doing that, and it's the discourse. And one of the things that worries me at the moment is the loss of the capacity to have discourse with people we disagree with. I try really hard to stay very open because I think there's always something you can learn. And with that deep democracy method, there's always something that you can pull out and go, that's interesting. How can we bring that along with us in that decision making? That was a pretty seminal moment in my leadership career.
And also the blue and red. I really love the fact that because everybody has a bit of blue in them and everybody has a bit of red in them, right?
Yes, exactly.
And I feel like a lot of what's happening right now is you choose one side or the other.
Yes.
And it's becoming
So
really
divisive
strong right now. And so I really love the fact that it's also not only calling it out in other people, but us calling it out in ourselves.
Yeah.
And going, well, actually, yeah, I do have a little bit of red in me.
Yeah.
I do have a bit of blue in me. I'm primarily red, but I have a little bit of blue, or I'm primarily blue, but I have a bit of red.
Yeah.
And it's acknowledging those little bits of red or blue, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Rather than going, you're wrong, I'm right.
Yes, that's right. And listening, deep listening, that's part of the deep democracy model. The idea of deep listening is also something that I've been very privileged to learn about and witness through my work with First Nations communities, because that type of leadership too is a lot about listening.
Yeah.
And these models of understanding and building community, I think, are ones that we can really draw from the ancient wisdom, and practices. They're thousands and thousands of years old.
Yeah. Have you used any in particular in a group situation or with a foster child?
Oh, gosh, with foster kids all the time. And one of the practices that we use a lot in foster care is co-regulation.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the idea. And you would have seen me do it earlier when Cora and I arrived, and she was hungry and a bit upset. And what I did was I took a very big, deep breath. So I tried to regulate my system to help her feel at ease, because she's picking up cues from me about where we are in the world, how things are. And so with foster care, some of the training that you have is actually around ways in which when kids are getting distressed or angry or they're throwing things around, that's because they're not able to. And we spoke about brain development earlier. Neural pathways are formed when you're little and they build over time. And some kids, that's been disrupted and they haven't quite built those neural pathways. And so when they're angry and throwing things, it's very hard for them to find what we call control. And so what you do is you help that child regulate by regulating yourself. So when obviously someone's angry around you, what you feel is anger in you. You're attacking me, or why this isn't fair. Why are you screaming at me? And you actually have to try and do the opposite, is slow right down, big deep breath, and wait until you can get that child to regulate, and then talk about what's been happening. So that felt like a really big feeling for you. Can you tell me a bit more about what happened there? But you can only do that when people are back regulated, when their brain has shifted into that space of feeling at ease, because when it's in that fight-flight mode, nothing gets through.
How incredible would that be to be used in every relationship?
It's a really powerful tool. I did use it a few times on council. The other thing that we do a lot with foster care is we look at the wounded child. So you might have a 14-year-old child in your care who's behaving a certain way. So what you're actually seeing is the 4-year-old child who didn't have their needs met when they needed them. And so I think that's a really helpful practice, actually. And there's a few times in my term on council that I thought about that.
Isn't it funny, because some adults, because just that wounded child stays, right? And then when they're in a situation that feels threatening or uncomfortable or provoking, an experience or a memory. I think Cora agrees with
Cora
this.
definitely got a lot to say about this issue. She likes a good chat.
She's all over the co-regulation strategy.
I really like the point that you've made about doing the work on yourself. And I think it's really important that as a society that perhaps is increasingly less connected to, say, a spiritual practice or cohesiveness, because we're becoming increasingly individualised, I think. Social media has a big part to play in that, but also just the way things are structured. I know since COVID there's been a rapid loss of volunteerism, for example. Now, these are the things that keep us together as a community. When you're volunteering, you do something good for someone else, but usually it makes you feel 100 times better, more connected, less socially isolated. You're exposed to people you'd never have met before. And those kind of things really help us have those hard conversations. And that's what I think we've been missing. And through doing the work on yourself, I think people come to that realisation that they're imperfect and flawed person themselves. They catch their own triggers before other people trigger them.
But we protect ourselves too much, don't we?
It's true.
We try not to expose ourselves to situations that might be triggering or scary or something that we're not used to.
The world
Go
does
into
feel a bit
protection.
scary at the moment. I think, we were talking about young people before, and I know that many of them feel a high sense of climate anxiety. And, in having Cora, I did think a lot about what was the kind of world that I was bringing her into.
What are your thoughts on that? What do you think?
I mean, I feel great apprehension that we're losing that ability to connect as humans. And things like what you're doing here is incredibly powerful, because we need to be able to hear stories, hear perspectives, to reconnect.
You love the stories, Cora.
Oh my gosh, you're having such a big chat, honestly.
I love it.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. I'm not paying you enough attention, am I? Are you getting hungry again, maybe? Is that what's going on?
My youngest is 26. And I remember when I fell pregnant with her, I was telling my 28-year-old daughter the other day, when I fell pregnant with her, I had this instant feeling of, what am I doing bringing another child into this world? And that was 27 years ago, right? And I feel right now, it feels like it's even more challenging to bring a child into the world. I mean, we didn't have social media. My children didn't have social media until they were 12-ish,
Oh, gosh.
And so I didn't have that battle. I didn't have that, the segregated society or segregated communities that your children are engaging in that you have no idea that they're engaging in. And they're not only engaging in them, they're not physically engaging in them, so they're mentally engaging in them, because it's a digital
hard to have
world.
discussions with them because you don't know what it is they're accessing.
You have no idea.
Yeah, I've really been trying to lean into AI and learn a lot more about that.
Yeah,
I listened
nice.
to a great podcast called Your Undivided Attention, and they often talk about the ethics around AI, but they recently explored the experiences of some families whose children had, and just a reference to suicide coming up, had taken their own lives after engagement with AI chatbots. There was a recent Four Corners investigation into sextortion of young teenagers. And I just think there's a world out there that, that's not the world when I was growing up. And this is the world that Cora will be facing. And how do I prepare her for that kind of engagement and keep her safe?
And what have you come up with?
Well, I think I often find with foster kids a really important thing is starting early on conversations. Things, for example, like consent around touching your body starts early. That's the training that I've had anyway. So even with little kids, when I'm changing her nappy, I'm always talking to her about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And,
She likes that. She's like, yeah, Mum.
this is so funny. She normally falls fast asleep at 11, so I think she's really decided
She's
she wants
excited
to
about
be.
Wild Wacky Wonderful Humans.
She is a wild, wacky, wonderful
Yeah.
human. That's what this little one is. But those conversations have to start early. I think we often wait until we think kids are old enough to understand. But there's ways in which we can start early. So using the consent one as an example, with little kids, you'll say, a lot of people are sort of quite hands-on with kids. And I will often ask when I see kids, would you like a high five or a hug? It's your choice.
Yeah.
Do you want a high five? And some kids say yes, they don't want the hug. They don't want to be touched. That happens at 4 or 5 years old. You're teaching them bodily autonomy. So later down the track, when they're in a relationship or when they're in a setting where someone might be engaging in behaviours that they shouldn't be, that child knows, I can say no. I can decline. And so maybe a model we can apply to what's happening in the online space is discussions around what they're seeing and what are safe behaviours, how to analyse and pull things apart.
And that's where it is difficult though, isn't it? Because we don't know what they're being exposed to. So it's difficult to know what conversations to have other than being aware and alert and looking out for signs. Now, there's so much that's not real either.
And I think that's a really interesting point, which is where a lot of people get stuck. We have people living in multiple realities where communal facts are no longer communal.
No?
There are people living in, I guess, a space where they have beliefs that they strongly hold to, but that others don't believe. I think we've seen that through Holocaust denial, for example, and climate change denial. Views that are emerging that are so hard to penetrate. You can't have conversations with people about it. I noticed that during COVID as well. One of the things that I did during COVID was I didn't delete friends who were refusing to be vaccinated. Even though I worked for the Department of Health, I actually had conversations with people and I tried to respect their autonomy and have conversations about why I thought immunisation did matter, but certainly not, removing someone. I think that debate got very polarised and demonised. And I think we need to heal some of what happened during that time. I know there's plenty of people who've come out of COVID feeling quite a lot of mental distress, and we need to do some healing and discussion about, as a community, how we come back together. I think what we're not doing enough is having conversations about what happened during that time, reconciling what happened for us as individuals, what happened for us as a community. I think we do need to actually, there's a lot of sort of, like set and forget after COVID.
Sure, yeah.
It ended, but the impact of it on our lives needs to still be aired. My message is one of hope, though, because I often think about my grandmother, who was born in 1922, and the changes that she saw in her life. But, she had her father and her husband and then later her son all served overseas in active war. And I think about communities now, and unfortunately today I think there's over 50 conflicts globally, from North Sudan through to other places like the Ukraine, what's happening in Gaza. What we're seeing is situations where people are living through fairly horrific circumstances, but there is still hope for healing afterwards. And that's why some of the work that I did after Black Saturday continues to inspire me, because there was an incredible woman called Rhonda Abotomy who did some work following the loss of her family members in Black Saturday about post-traumatic growth. It was something that really deeply moved me. She ended up partnering with Melbourne Uni to sort of progress the work further. But what we were seeing across Victoria, and I worked with women in Kinglake and Marysville and a few of the outer-lying affected communities like Bendigo and Corangamite and Gippsland also had fires. Alpine Shire, there were 2 lives lost there, often the forgotten sort of towns. Yeah. But what we discovered is that people experience some brutal and deeply traumatizing things, but they also then experience this incredible euphoria of community coming together to rebuild, to connect. And I think that's something that we can do with COVID. We can talk about the harm, the damage, the heartache, the ways in which individually we broke down, we were isolated, stuck in our homes and retreated within ourselves. Then we can also talk about the growth that can come out of that and how we can draw on that to become stronger again.
Yeah, for sure. So as part of that work that she did for the post-traumatic growth, what was the primary activity or action that she had uncovered or discovered?
Yeah, I think there was a range of things that she discovered, but I think overall what she learnt was that the human spirit is very resilient and that given the right settings, that when people are offered the opportunity to come together as they were after Black Saturday. So Black Saturday was a traumatic event.
For those who don't know what Black Saturday was, do you want to just...
Yeah, that was February 7, 2009. Very unexpectedly across the state, I think the temperatures hit nearly 50 degrees, strong winds and multiple fires broke out. Not just one, but multiple. 173 people lost their lives. But also the survivors of that day experienced, loss of home. Like some people walked away with just the T-shirt on their back. Entire towns were wiped out. Thousands and thousands of dwellings lost, livestock, native animals, people's livelihoods, farmers. What I discovered was, I come from a farming community. I didn't know that about 90% of farmers' fences aren't insured because you can't. People's lives were broken. It was a truly devastating day in the history of Australia, and one that still, for those communities, was deeply imprinted on their psyche. It was probably the first time that, also there was Ash Wednesday about 20 years before that when people realised how devastating fire could be. And I think because of the impact of climate change, we're seeing increasing fire and dangers, and, the idea of stay and defend is not one that's really standing up anymore. No. It's just not possible to defend. Oh, yeah, Rhonda's work around post-traumatic growth. That was really about giving communities the right settings, bringing people together to talk about what empowered them as a local community. And I think when we talked before about that sense of, how overwhelmed the world feels at the moment with problems, is that we need to come back to local communities. Margaret Wheatley's done some really interesting work on the end of civilization. There's a great podcast. She talks a lot about what's been happening globally, but it's happened before to other civilizations over time in human history. And that the thing that we need to focus on right now is not global affairs, but the hyper-local. Reconnecting, building projects at a local level, and that's where we can make change. That sense of powerlessness we talked about with kids, they probably feel like they can't, unless they're Greta Thunberg,
Yeah.
make global change. So
Yeah,
what they
exactly.
can do is focus on small local projects that might make them feel like they're reconnected and feeling more engaged. And that's why I think, we talked a bit about local council and why that work matters too. And I think one of my key messages at the moment is to remind people that when local elections are happening, it's really important to pay attention. And it doesn't require an encyclopedic knowledge of politics. It just requires a quick Google search. When you get those ballot papers, just take 5 minutes of your day, Google the names on there. If they've done anything in community, you'll see it on their Facebook page. You'll see it in newsletter you might find on a Google search. You'll understand who they are and what they stand for more than what they write about. And I heard after the last council elections that people just, I didn't know who to vote for, or I just, it was a bit overwhelming. And I just said to people, it's really important to stay engaged on things. It just takes a few minutes. And I know there's a lot of fatigue at the moment, but it doesn't take much to just, when you can, turn your attention to these things.
That's really good advice. Just Google the candidates on the ballot paper and just see if they're aligned with your values.
If you are a ratepayer in the city of Kingston, you're probably paying $3,000 a year on rates. A 4-year term is a $12,000 investment you're making. So if I would come to you today and say, hey, I want $12,000, you would say to me, well, hold on a minute.
Let me just take a moment to Google you.
We have a little chat about what are you going to do with it? How are you going to show me you've spent it well?
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it, actually.
I think the big thing I'm feeling at the moment is we need to re-empower community to be active citizens, to be really involved. Democracy is a privilege that we have here in Australia, and there's a lot of rights that have been hard won. It wasn't until very late that First Nations communities were considered citizens in their own countries. Active citizenship is something I really want to actively promote, talk about and encourage, because I think what we're seeing is people turning away from politics.
It becomes overwhelming.
It is. And it's also really divisive and yucky at the moment. The discussions I'm seeing are really ugly. They don't need to be. We can disagree respectfully. We don't all think the same and feel the same, but what we should be able to do is have a discussion about it without name calling, without making it a toxic, nasty issue, just a discussion around how we feel about things. And I really encourage people to kind of stick to that. I'm really fascinated by what's happening federally at the moment, watching Susan Ley as the first leader of the Liberal Party, a female leader of the Liberal Party, and her experience, because I'm very passionate about women's engagement in politics. I've seen her come in and I think make a very genuine attempt to be collaborative. I think has happened is that she's being white-anted. I don't see that she's got the support of her party. And I feel very sad about that for women, that, we haven't had a lot of women leaders at the federal level, even at the state level. I think this is only the second time in Victoria's history we've had a female premier. But those ideas, and going back to deep democracy, of collaborative decision-making.
How can that change, though? What needs to change for that to happen?
It's us, the citizens.
Going back to local.
Yeah, and saying we want better standards from our politicians. We're sick of the name calling. We're sick of the divisive politics from either side. We don't want to see things that divide us. We want to see things that bring us together. And
so as a citizen, how do you do that? How can you be active? How can you be vocal?
I think it starts with just paying a bit of attention. So if you can add some politicians, like your local member, to your social media feed, you'll start to get updates and you can engage with them. Engaging with your local council, there's your Kingston, you'll say, where you can create an account and go in and have your input onto lots of different projects happening in Kingston.
Do they read the information that anyone submits?
Well,
do they listen?
I know from working with council staff when I was on council that they did listen. I don't know that that's the same for all things. One of the things I guess I'd share is that the weight of decision-making at a political level too. I remember Moorabbin Airport. It's one of the most important airports in all of Australia. I didn't know this until I was on council. It trains over a third of Australia's pilots and has, I think, one of the highest volumes of aircraft movement. Also serves as an emergency base over summer for firefighting equipment from North America. It's a really significant airport. Now, we were doing a lot of advocacy in the last council term to try and protect the airport. It is in the middle of a residential area, but it's very important. And as the suburbs continue to grow, having an airport right there is quite important. But a resident reached out to me and talked about the impact on his mental health from the noise of the aircraft. And I thought, I'll invite him into the office. He was very angry. He felt very distressed. And I used that model of deep democracy. I used that model of let's take a step back and listen. So I asked the staff who are involved in Moorabbin Airport to come and sit and listen.
Wow.
We weren't necessarily able to change the work that we were doing because the position was we did want to protect Moorabbin Airport and here were all the reasons why. But actually at the end of the meeting, he did thank us and say, I felt heard, I felt seen, and I understand why now you're making those decisions that just didn't make sense to me before. Well, that can't happen on every single thing. There's 170,000 residents in Kingston. But where we can, having those discussions and listening to each other and then going, okay, I don't agree with you still, but I understand why you've made that decision. And I think that's something that I'd like to see more of.
If you go back to the basic human need, it is about being seen and heard.
Yes.
It's like, if you see and hear me, then I feel valued, I feel honoured, I feel respected.
Yes.
You know, I feel like that I matter. I guess in that situation, that guy probably felt that he was disregarded. His view was disregarded until you actually sat him down and spoke and listened.
That's what I'd love to see more of.
How can we, as active citizens, we can add councillors and representatives, council representatives to our social media account?
I think the Sea Soul Sauna campaign's been a really effective one. And when you look at, obviously, the outcomes that they're hoping for haven't been achieved, but what I've seen is a rallying of the community that's actually given me hope. I look at that and I think it's a very distressing situation.
Bigger perspective, the Sea Soul Sauna is a sauna that was set up by Amy Salisbury, who's actually been a guest on this podcast, and we've done the interview in her sauna. So I think she's episode 8 or 9. So check that out. So she is subleasing the land, and it is council land, and she has recently been told that her lease will not be extended, even though it was an 11-month trial, and has not been given any feedback. If it was a trial, the pure idea of a trial is that you trial something to see if it works or doesn't.
That's right.
And then you do a review and you provide a report. And so this has not happened. She's just been advised that she needs to close down. So what Jenna's referring to is the rallying of the citizens, the active citizens.
Been phenomenal.
There's 2,000 people on the petition. There's been a couple of times where people have gone down to the sauna to express their love for the sauna. Me personally, every time I go to the sauna, I meet people whose lives have changed because of the sauna.
And lives have been saved.
Lives have
Men's
actually
mental
been
health
saved.
is one of the big things that have come out of that sauna, the improvements. And I think it's incredibly sad, but what I've taken hope from is the ways in which the community have rallied and showed me that people still care. I've been really amazed to see just how much people are willing to stand back up, and I think, gosh, I'd love to rally you all for a few causes I'm working on.
This community is an active community, and one of the things that Amy actually said on the podcast is community is the new therapy.
Yes.
And, you know, when you were talking about community before, I was thinking about how there's so many different communities popping up at the moment, which is hopeful. People are wanting to connect.
They really are wanting to connect.
They're wanting to get back to the basics of just having a conversation and belonging. We are tribal by nature.
Yes.
You know, just that sense of belonging.
I think that the judgment is what I think is the key thing, and that we sort of touched upon it earlier with that discussion around COVID, was that feeling of being judged. No one likes it, and it really is very divisive. So if we can create spaces where we can exist with all of our different views, harmoniously share a space, I think that's very powerful. One thing I've been amazed by is the mum economy, I'm calling it. Of course, there's also carers, grandparents and dads involved in that too. That's something that's really blown me away, is just how generous people are. This whole outfit is secondhand, hand-me-downs. All of the equipment we've got at home, the pram, the cot, all handed down. There's just an incredible sense of community around parenthood that I really want to call out as something I'm very grateful for, and that surprised me. I had experienced it before with foster care, but I'd sort of thought that was because people were tugging on the heartstrings, hearing about kids without a home, people being very generous. But I've discovered even with Cora, who comes from a loving home and doesn't have those same needs, but that sense of outpouring of community support has been so lovely.
Just coming back to the community of being the tribal community, it takes a village to nurture a child.
It really does, and I think that's one of the key things I want to talk about today. Because of the proposed changes that were made in the last couple of days, youth crime is something that is, top of the discussion points for community and politicians. And no, it is something that I don't deny is of great concern, and it's very scary. I think what we need to do more of, though, is ask the why. And that's another technique that I've learned over the years of work I've been doing in facilitation, the 5 whys. You just keep asking why. You look at a social problem and you go, why? Oh, because of this. Well, why is that? And really try and get to the root cause. And I just want to ask, why are young people suddenly engaged in such violent behaviour? What has gone wrong? What has happened? What could prevent them from being activated in the way that they are? I had a really interesting discussion via Instagram chat. I put up a post yesterday about the proposed model of adult crime, adult time. So this is the idea in Victoria by the Premier that if you are age 14 and over and you commit what is called an adult crime, you do the adult time. Right. And a friend wrote to me and said, oh, so what, do you just let them get away with it? And I said, absolutely not. That's not what I'm proposing. We need consequences. But what I can tell you, and I've worked in Corrections Victoria and worked in an Aboriginal legal service and been to visit prisons, nothing good will come out of 14-year-olds going into those institutions. No. Nothing good comes out of it, not just for them, but for the taxpayer. When I was at Corrections Victoria over 10 years ago, it cost over $100,000 a year to keep an adult male prisoner in prison. Now, when you look at the increase in the population base of people going to prison, the cost to us is enormous. And another point that I'm really passionate about is New South Wales did some work around looking at young children, newborns, who had certain indicators like a parent who'd been in prison, a parent who'd been removed as a child, was in the child protection system or hadn't finished year 12. All these indicators that we know about, that small group of, let's say, 5% of the population ended up costing the state about 70% of the budget down the track because they went on to repeat those same behaviours. So when we talked earlier about family violence prevention, I'd also extend that same understanding to some of the other social issues that we have and thinking about what are the ways that we can prevent young people from being engaged in these kinds of behaviours. And if they are, what are the ways that we can rehabilitate them instead of, I guess, condemning them to a life in prison, because the remand spaces are already bad enough for kids. That's where they're awaiting trial. But then what you find is that kids will go into those settings and become institutionalised, and then they come out. No one wants to offer someone a job who's got a criminal record. And they then enter the cycle. And recidivism, so that's when people, repeat offend. I remember talking to people who would say, I needed somewhere to sleep. I was hungry. It was just too hard on the outside. I couldn't cope. I couldn't manage. I didn't have the support. So I tried to get jobs. No one wanted to hire me. Thinking about young people, we need consequences, but we need appropriate consequences and ones that focus on getting to the root causes of why these young people are behaving that way and how we can help them make better life choices. We talked about brain development earlier and you were interested in studying in criminology. I did, through foster care, get some exposure to brain development, and in an average child who's had a very regulated, untraumatic childhood, a 14-year-old still is going to struggle at times with consequential or, that really nuanced decision-making because the brain's still developing. If you add to that a child who hasn't had a regular caregiver, who's had experienced trauma, which doesn't allow the neural pathways of the brain to develop. So the ability to kind of go from feeling angry about something but then not actually lashing out and doing that is something you build over time in a safe environment. If you come from a childhood where you're hungry all the time, where your needs aren't being met, it's very hard for you to learn how to regulate yourself as an adult. You continue that behaviour.
What do you think, what could work?
I think we can draw from First Nations communities who do exceptional work working with young people, bringing in elders, programs targeted to young people and why they might be offending. These are programs that are tried and tested and work. But I think it's about re-engagement with young people. What we see is a very fractured world in many ways. So kids are on their devices a lot. And I get it. It's hard as working parents, but getting children to reconnect with their community as a sense of that things matter for them as well are really critical.
I spoke to an African guy I work with, and he was saying that with the African kids committing crimes, he said they need to let us deal with it. They need to let us have that African court system because the kids are respected in that world. And the kids respect their elders in that world.
Yes, they do.
And so if they let us deal with it, then the crime will
It's a great point, because the Koori Court model is one that's been very successful in Victoria. It's something that we could draw from because that is exactly that. The offender has to plead guilty to their crime. So they're recognising the impact of their behaviour. But what they do is instead of going to court, they sit at a table just like this with an elder and the magistrate, and they break it down and they have discussions and they talk about the impact of their offending. And I think it can be life-changing. I can only speak to a middle-class white woman, so I don't want to overstep the mark here. But in 2007, I started volunteering in Dandenong with the South Sudanese community, who many were recently arrived in Australia. And I remember what it felt like when I went on student exchange when I was 15 to Italy, and I couldn't speak Italian. I was really unhappy for the first 6 months. I cried a lot, felt very isolated, never forgotten that feeling, and always said, I'll do my very best to help people in Australia feel like they can fit in and flourish. And so I became a tutor. So I was doing English and maths tutoring for South Sudanese kids. And it gave me some insight. I remember when one of the kids that I tutored for, over 5 years, I took them to Fountain Gate to help them walk around with their CV and apply for jobs. I was horrified to see the responses we got. When people thought it was me applying for the job, it was almost an instantaneous, great, when can you start? When I explained I'm actually here as an advocate helping her build the skills to have those conversations, because she's never done it before, there was lots of closed expressions, and in many cases a bit of a reversal of, we'll have to give you a call, I'll get the manager to get, and no calls.
Wow.
Now, if those young people don't have those opportunities for employment, for engagement and feeling purpose, feeling valued, I think it can lead to some really poor outcomes. We have to invest more, particularly in the outer-lying communities. I think it's hard for people in the middle ring of Melbourne to understand what it's like to live in Pakenham or Cranbourne or Melton, where you don't have the services, you don't have the public transport. Kids are sitting there with nothing to do.
How can we, like our listeners or anyone who is in a position of power or influence, how can we help to change that?
Have nuanced conversations about youth offending and youth crime. Like, it's very scary. It's terrifying. Home invasions and cars being stolen, it is terrifying. That trauma is enormous, and we want to stop that kind of behaviour as much as we can before it starts. Because I've lived in other jurisdictions. Like when I lived in Italy, for example, there were parts of Naples that I wasn't allowed to go to. This is too dangerous. I think it is really terrifying, but what I think needs to happen is more nuanced discussion about it. The sort of lock 'em up approach, not going to help any of us. It's going to be at a greater cost to us as taxpayers, with a poorer outcome for us down the track when people come out of prison. Can you imagine the brain formation of a 14-year-old in a prison? Writing to your MPs and saying, yes, we want consequences. We don't want kids to just think that they can get away with offending. But what we want is a better response. What we're seeing at the moment is system failure. Police are out there trying their hardest, obviously, and there's a lot that they're facing. Family violence is one of the biggest reasons they get called out. But if we could get a response that actually involved, say, police and social workers, and the schools are more resourcing to those types of activities, the prevention and early intervention activities, I think we'd see some changed outcomes. Because you've got to go back to that question of why. Like, why would a child do that level of offend like that? Why would they want to spend time in prison when the other alternatives are that they have a job, they get to buy a house? If they're locked out of those things, the other alternative is criminal behaviour. I think, to me, that's sort of at the heart of what's going on. Kids feel locked out of opportunity. When I was growing up, we were much more socially mobile. I think we're becoming much more entrenched in social disadvantage. And if we share the wealth around a bit more, it's better for everyone.
Exactly.
See on social media people leading these luxurious lives, and they go, I want that too, but I can't because no one will employ me because I'm black. I think we need to really think a lot about that.
Yeah, it's so challenging, isn't it? You want to be able to help, but then there's so many limitations to the help as well. So, like for me, I'm a middle-aged white woman as well. How can I help? And how can I contribute to that?
Drive to Learn programs.
What's that?
There's all councils run programs where you're teaching young people to, council support programs where you're teaching people to drive, volunteering with youth programs, signing up to become a respite foster care. Everyone's sort of situation is a bit different. You do need a single bedroom for that child. They can't share a space. You don't have to have a foster child living with you all the time. You can do weekends and holidays.
How did you get into that, Jenna?
That's a big question. I was working in 2015 in an Aboriginal legal service. Predominantly women there were experiencing family violence. And I just want to make the point that the offenders of the family violence, the perpetrators, came from all different communities and more often than not were non-Aboriginal. So I just want to make that point very clearly that this is an issue that Aboriginal women were experiencing from all types of men. They weren't all identifying as Aboriginal, predominantly not. And I'd been there about 3 months and came in just after Christmas, and our senior lawyer was sobbing in her office. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is what's happened. And I went in to speak to her and I said, can I do anything to help? And she said, look, over Christmas, 3 of her clients had their kids removed. And it sort of broke something inside of me a little bit to see her, this fierce lawyer, you know, who'd go into court, go into battle and be so broken. And then I thought about those families over Christmas, which is a time of family connection and usually joy, that they were having their kids removed. And usually it was because they couldn't provide safe housing. So a lot of women will stay in abusive relationships because they've got nowhere else to go. Then they get their children removed because they're told they can't keep their children safe from the offender. Or they leave and they end up homeless or couch surfing at a mate's place. Then they have the children removed because they can't provide safe housing. So what do? Really stuck in this cycle. And I said, why can't we do more about this before the kids end up in care? So there's a model in Canada where they have social workers go in and visit at-risk families every day. It's like the 9-to-5 job is they'd come into the home, they'd teach that parent how to parent, because the majority of kids in foster care and in prison have been in the out-of-home care system. Like I said earlier with that work in New South Wales, we know there's a cycle that just keeps repeating until you interrupt it. If you could go into the home, teach this person how to parent, help them pay some of the bills, get them some food, teach them how to cook a nutritious meal.
Because this stuff doesn't come naturally.
No, they are learnt skills. Yeah. I spoke to one of the Aboriginal childcare agencies at the time, VACA, which still operates, and I said, would you be interested in trying to trial a new model, which is preventative foster care? It hasn't really taken off yet, but I am still advocating strongly for it. It is essentially where you become a foster carer to support the birth parent. You don't foster children in the system. You foster children who are with a birth parent who's trying their hardest to keep the children with them but needs some help.
So you go into their home to help them, or the child comes to your home?
Yeah, the children were coming to my homes. Every third weekend on a Friday night, I'd meet their mum halfway between both our homes. She'd drop them off. There was no workers involved. And on the Sunday, she'd pick them back up again. And for 2.5 years, we did that. And it worked amazingly well until the funding was withdrawn for this approach and we weren't able to do it anymore. And I think what we then saw was about a month and a half after that, the mother was unable to maintain custody of her children, and they came to live with me for about 14, 15 months during that time while we waited to sort of get her back on track and get her to a place where her kids could be with her again. If we could do more like that, instead of waiting until families fall apart and pick up the pieces. So the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff analogy. I'm really big on prevention across all the things that we talk about, whether it's healthcare, family violence, or looking at youth crime. Prevention is always going to be the best way of addressing it, the most time intensive and also budget intensive.
And we need people to do it, right? Yeah. And so there's going to be volunteers required. So if anyone's looking to volunteer their time.
Yes, please do. Volunteerism is so important to volunteer.
I need to do that too. I've been talking about volunteering for far too long and not doing it.
People try, and a lot of organisations are under-resourced, so you might find it hard initially to find the right organisation.
So we've just had a bit of a breather.
It's lovely, getting some sun.
We had a little step outside into the sunshine, some fresh air.
Yeah, lovely actually.
So thank you for being a guest here today, Jenna. We've got 3 more little segments that we do with each guest. A quote or mantra that carries you through tough times.
Look for the gratitude. That's a really hard one, actually. It's from my yoga teacher, Emma. She is an incredible teacher, and we started a daily yoga gratitude practice where we'd write to each other 3 things we were grateful for, and it was fascinating. It's very easy on the good days and very hard on the bad day. Actually, it's a lot about the way you're reframing things.
Oh, I love that.
So when you've had a bad day or a bad interaction, the question to yourself is, what have I learned? What's the gift in that? And it's, at the start, it can feel really hard, but it's actually a really powerful practice to shift the way that you experience things.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. There's a practice that I love and that I use with clients, Lisa Nichols. 7 things. She does 7 things. You can do 3. 7 things I'm proud of. Yeah. And you look in the mirror and you say, I'm proud of this, I'm proud of that, I'm proud of that. Then 7 things I forgive myself for. And then 7 things I commit for today or for tomorrow. And that kind of rides on the back of the gratitude, because you start to put things into perspective.
Yeah.
And you start to realise that life is all just a bunch of learnings and lessons. Isn't it?
It is. And when you can focus on
Opportunities.
it that way, it actually takes a lot of the hurt out of it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Look for the gratitude.
Yeah.
I love that. What's a moment as a foster carer that changed you forever?
I think the moment when one of the kids who was staying with me said, I'm going to run for school captain because I've watched you campaign for council and I think I can do it too.
Wow.
Still to this day, I get goosebumps. And it's interesting because I just found out recently that her brother, who was younger when he was living with me than her at the time, obviously, he is school captain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's incredible.
It's that idea of you can't be what you can't see. And so, you know, talking about young kids, young children again, and talking about pathways to leadership, you know, just seeing someone out there giving it their best, that was a very powerful moment. I still get goosebumps about that one.
Yeah, I just got goosebumps now. It's amazing. Yeah. Doing amazing work.
It's pretty special, isn't it? Yeah.
Very special. What's something that a child has taught you that no adult ever could?
Oh, there's a list that I could go on and on and on about. Creativity, the way that kids are creative and haven't shut that part of themselves off that a lot of adults have, I think is one of the big things. To enjoy things, to actually just really find the joy in what you're doing. Some of the simplest things, like I often find with kids, I always avoid big shopping centres and things like Luna Park where money's just falling out of your pocket. Yeah. Kids end up really unhappy, overstimulated and very unhappy. The happiest place I've found with kids is either at the kitchen bench making stuff and talking while you're making cake or licking the bowl, the chocolate cake you just made, or down at the beach collecting shells or sea glass. I have 2 foster kids who can spend an hour just on the beach picking out sea glass, making a little collection. Because I'd seen my mum making artwork out of it and I thought, well, we could do that too. So, yeah, being fully present, something kids teach you as well, whether they're yours or through foster care, being present. And the act of surrender is probably the other one. You just have to go with what's happening. You can't fight it.
So enjoy, surrender, and
be mindful.
The simple things.
The simple things, yeah.
That's beautiful. Amazing. We need to spend more time with children so that we can learn.
The way societies have always been, intergenerational. You know, older people spending time with young people is so beneficial for both.
We do such a good job of overcomplicating everything. If you could whisper one truth to every young woman doubting herself, what would you say?
There's all the old tropes of, you know, believe in yourself and give it a go. But I think the big thing is listen to yourself. I think within each of us, there's usually a little voice that is telling us what the truth is about our own experience. And if you can really listen to that and block out the noise, that can be very powerful. And that's what I did when I ran for politics. I just made a decision to just cut off, just stop listening to that self-doubt. I'd love to chat to you more about imposter syndrome. I don't believe that all women experience it. I think what we experience are barriers to leadership. And we talked a little bit earlier about the fact that we don't have many role models, that the women who are in leadership roles get torn apart. Julia Gillard and now look at Susan Ley, both sides of the political spectrum. We need to do better for women in leadership. So I think it's less about women having to feel like they're imposters or feel stronger in themselves and more about us all as a society making a more concerted effort to have gender equality as part of leadership. And going back and listening to that little voice, because I had a little voice inside of me saying, you can do it, you've got something to contribute. Listen to that voice, follow your gut. That's what's worked for me, so it might not work for everyone.
Yeah, it's so important. Okay, rapid fire.
Okay, here we go.
When baby sleeps, work or sleep for you?
Oh, everyone says sleep, but it's very hard not to work. Yeah.
To balance it?
We were saying earlier, Cora has been an amazing sleeper. So I think for those parents who are listening who aren't getting any sleep and just feeling a bit cranky or disheartened, don't be, because every baby's different. And I'm just lucky at the moment that she's choosing to sleep through a lot of the night. And so during the day, I'm not as exhausted as I would be. I also think a lot of the exhaustion from being a parent comes from breastfeeding. I think it's actually quite tiring, and I had an emergency C-section that was quite traumatic, and I think my body's still recovering from pregnancy. So just be kind to yourselves.
Baby Cora's 3 months
Yeah,
old.
she is. So if you're a new parent and you've birthed that child, please be kind to yourself.
Yeah, that's very important.
Yeah.
Coffee, tea or cacao?
Soy chai.
Soy chai.
I get this delicious prana chai. Make it in the saucepan. When I was living in Washington, D.C. and I travelled up to New York to visit a friend, and her family are Indian, and they taught me how to make chai in a saucepan. So I make that every morning as my little treat for myself.
I love it. That's beautiful. What makes you laugh no matter what?
Oh gosh, my dogs always make me, and the dog beach at Mentone, that always fills me with joy. Cora's face in the morning. I lean over because she sleeps in this little bassinet next to me on the bed, and she just, the smile that she has in the morning, it's not sort of a laugh, but I'm not laughing, but it feels like that same feeling of laughter, that joy, that smile that comes to your face.
It's so beautiful. What's a smell that makes you instantly happy?
Oh, so many. I love smell. Coriander and basil and mint, those kind of really herbaceous smells really make me happy. The smell of the water, the ocean, I think, that sort of, I can't really describe it. It's always a bit different, but having spent a lot of time down at the beach, I love that smell. The smell of the airport.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
It's a funny one. It fills me with a bit of like anticipation and excitement.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a very unique smell.
I'm going to have a bit of a sniff next time then.
Yeah, it's that kind of feeling of big adventures await. Yeah, get ready for it. There's so many other smells that, like, not always the ones that are associated have been quite positive. Like, I lived in Thailand for a year and I loved the smells of Bangkok, and some of them weren't the most nice smells.
But it's just familiar.
Yeah, that's right.
Nice. Your go-to to unwind?
Well, before pregnancy, it was yoga. Now it's walking, and being connected with Cora like this is really beautiful, and we're heart to heart like this.
It's beautiful. Text, call, or voice note?
I'm an all three, but often text at the moment. Although I have been doing a lot of voice notes, because when you're breastfeeding and you're one-handed, texting one-handed is actually quite hard. A lot of the voice notes. My friend and I call them mini podcasts. We podcast one another. 7-minute long. Yeah. So that's my friend Jo. She drives up from Inverloch and leaves those little podcasts, as she calls them. So I love getting her podcasts.
That's awesome. Something you always love to have in your bag. It's changed since Bubba's come?
Oh, no, but that's sort of stay the same. It'll be a combination of something like a lip balm and food.
What type of food?
Well, it usually involves chocolate. At the moment, it's Carmen's dark chocolate protein bars. I have one in the pram, and it's just when you're breastfeeding, you get hit with these sudden attacks of the hunger.
Who's a woman that you'd love to have dinner with? Alive or no longer here?
Oh, my gosh. I don't think I could pick one. There's so many that would be fascinating. I'd love to design a whole menu for women to sit down and nourish our bodies and come together. I think what I'd like to see if I could do that would be a group of women who come from across the political spectrum and engage in conversation. I watched this incredible Australian story recently about the curator of Mona and the work that she's doing around logging. And so she actually organised a 3-day conference for the logging industry to come together with people who were trying to protect native forests. And one of the big parts of it was the dinners that they'd have together at night. I think it was a very powerful idea to come together. So I'd actually love to bring together a big group of women across the political spectrum to sit down and talk about political leadership and the future for that of women, for women in Australia.
Beautiful. What does freedom feel like to you now?
A privilege, something that I don't take lightly. Something that I know we have to fight hard for. I feel worried about freedom. It feels great, but I also know that there are many, even in Australia, who don't experience freedom, whether they're living with mental health issues, living with the experience of racial discrimination. Freedom's something that, it's something worth fighting for.
Yeah, we are very lucky, aren't we?
Yeah.
And I think it's important to bring that gratitude into that.
Yeah, it's true.
If your life had a soundtrack, what would the first song be?
Oh, that's really good. I've been watching Xanra. I've been watching a lot and listening to a lot of podcasts while I've been breastfeeding, but Xanra does the Take 5. I've been sitting there thinking about what my Take 5 would be. So I don't think I could pick one song, but early childhood memories, Mum used to love Jimi Hendrix, and there was a whole lot of tracks that I used to love listening to when I was growing up that remind me of her. But then my brother loved heavy metal and made these mixtapes, and Metallica was one of the bands, which have just been to Melbourne. I was so jealous watching everyone rocking out to Metallica. Yeah, I love music. I think it'd be hard for me to pick one. I feel like a mixtape, lots of different genres, because music's just an incredible thing for the soul.
Oh, it's so good. I love music. What's one word that captures your life right now?
Oh, vivid is the word that comes to mind. Because I'm just experiencing life in really full high definition colour. I think what happens when you have a baby. And it was very interesting. There's this beautiful comedian, Sashi. She was talking the other day about being childless and what that felt like for her and how she tired of hearing a mother experiences a love like no other and, you know, what that meant for her as a woman who's probably not going to be able to have children. So I've been thinking a lot about that experience and how lucky I am to have had Cora. But yeah, just the way that your way of being in the world does change and the way you experience and see it and feel it because you're flooded with oxytocin. And in this cute clip, she described it as being like on a fentanyl high, which I've never had before, but I thought it was quite funny the way she sort of turned something quite sad into something quite funny and reminded me that, yes, this amazing feeling that I have is also biological.
Yeah. Do you feel like your senses
are very vivid? Definitely noticing a lot of details, but then also this kind of singular focus. So
interesting, hey, it can be all of that and all of this at the same time.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's an interesting biological experience.
And I've got 3 final questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
Ask each guest. The first one is, what is one of the wildest things you've ever done?
I think it was talking my way into a restaurant in Formentera, which is off the Spanish coast. They'd been booked out for months by people in super yachts, but I'd ridden up on this little old rented €14 a day moped and said, are you sure you can't just squeeze one little person in? And they eventually did. And then they sat me at a table where there was a few chairs and I said, I'm happy to share. I love sharing tables and I'm travelling on my own. This couple sat down and we got chatting and they were Persian Canadian and they said, what are you doing? I said, I'm travelling around Europe and then I'm going to Burning Man for the first time ever. Wow. And they were like, on your own? I said, I really want to go and see this 3rd largest city in Nevada that's all about gifting from the heart and creativity and self-expression and radical being. And they said, oh, yeah, well, we're going to Burning Man as well. So we'll connect you with some people so you're not on your own. Wow. And 2 weeks later, I drove out into the desert of Nevada in this hire car and I'd stopped by a better version of, I think it was Walmart, and bought a yoga mat to sleep on, literally a $20 tent, and a bicycle.
You got to have a bicycle at Burning Man.
You've got to ride around. It's so big. Right. And it was wild.
I'd love to talk to you about your experience there.
It's an incredible experience. I don't know what it's like now, but, you know, I chose to be drug and alcohol free. That's not really my thing anyway, but I thought I really just want to experience this. And it was a phenomenal, unforgettable life experience, but very wild. Out there in the dust for a week.
And so did you connect with the people at the restaurant?
You know what? We kept trying to find one. At Burning Man, there's no phones.
Right.
And so you'd leave little notes on people's tent and I'd keep saying, I'll come back and try to find you. Never found them, but I found all these other incredible people. I did write a thank you note to this couple to say thank you for the introduction to this incredible group called Burners Without Borders who use some of the money that they make off that camp every year to do aid projects internationally.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. What about one of the wackiest things you've done?
I think the morning after my cousin's wedding in Lake Wanaka, that's in New Zealand, just outside of Queenstown, I've got Scottish heritage and we do tend to have a bit of a wild time at the weddings. Yeah. The next morning we got up and went on a hike to the top of this beautiful point and I decided to do a nudie run.
Oh, yeah? Nice.
It was quite funny because on the way up we didn't have sunscreen and we'd stopped and asked this young couple who had a baby just like this actually, said, I'm sure you've got sunscreen, you've got a baby, can we please have some sunscreen? Put it on. We made it up a bit faster than they did. And I did my little nudie run to the top and then was putting my clothes back on and everyone. And I'd said to my cousin's boyfriend at the time, you have to turn around, you're not allowed to look. I'm doing my nudie run, this is for girls only. Anyway, the couple with the baby got back up to the top of the hill. And I said, oh, yeah, I've just done my nudie run at the top. And they're like, yeah, we know. We saw the whole thing coming up the hill. And I was like, oh, front on
That's
you.
so funny.
It was so
that's
funny.
Awesome.
So I think that's probably the wackiest thing I've done.
Good on you.
But
that's
funny because there I was thinking that I'd faced everyone, you know, all everyone saw was my little bottom.
Yeah.
You know, that's not so offensive, but I'd forgotten that everyone walking up the hill could see everything.
So good. That's good.
So, yeah, New Zealand.
Nice. You're welcome.
Bare your soul and bare all.
Exactly, yeah. The trip that keeps on giving.
Yes.
And I think this is probably one of my favourite questions, and you demonstrate this to me as well. What makes humans wonderful?
Oh, their capacity to love, I think. Love's a very powerful thing, and it comes in many different forms. And I think it's something that is what makes us so unique as a species, is that capacity to love. And if we could see more of it and strengthen ourselves with love, I think we'd be better for it.
Great. That's so beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, it's
Thank
been
you
so
for sharing your
nice.
stories, and thank you for sharing your heart and your truth and your
Yeah, thank
vulnerability with
you.
us today. It's truly appreciated, and it's so beautiful for the audience to see humans. We're all humans, we're all doing the best we can with the resources we have.
Yes.
And it's so nice to have a chat with someone who's really deeply understanding the human psyche and human needs, the need to be seen and heard. And you're doing that for so many people, and that's just incredible.
Oh, thank you.
I'm so grateful to be in your presence, and I'm so grateful that you've come as a guest on Wild Wacky Wonderful Humans.
Thank you so much for having me.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Cora, for being here. You beautiful girl. She's actually asleep now.
She's been asleep for a little while. Yeah, she's sort of buried in there. She does this little thing where she buries her face. So I count the breaths.
Thank you for demonstrating such beautiful motherhood. Your deep care and kindness for your child, because
I love
we
this
think
so
that's natural, and a lot of people, they don't feel that.
It's
And
it's hard. It's
it is
hard work. Parents out there are doing it tough. So just, as I said earlier, be kind to yourselves.
Yeah.
Big deep breaths, you'll get through it.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank
and
you.
we appreciate it. Jump onto Jenna's socials. I'll put the links in the show notes.
Yeah, please feel free to connect anytime.
The things that we've talked about today. Be an active citizen if you can.
Yeah.
Get out there, invoke, provoke change where it's important, because we're the ones who can do that.
Yeah, that's right. It's a good message.
Yeah. Thank you for that message.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we move on, let's just pause together for a moment. Thank you so much, Jenna, for such beautiful wisdom. Thanks for sharing so openly, with such honesty, with clarity, vulnerability, and for bringing your whole self into this conversation alongside gorgeous baby Cora. Jenna, thanks for your truth, your courage, the work that you continue to do for children, for families, and for our communities. If you're listening right now, we have just heard a powerful reminder of a few very important things. We were reminded that co-regulation starts with us. Slowing your breath, softening your body, and staying present. It's not passive, it's powerful. Whether you're parenting, leading, navigating conflict. We were also reminded that behaviour is a form of communication. Ask why instead of reacting. That opens space for understanding, healing, and for better outcomes, especially with children and young people. We're also reminded that prevention matters. Supporting families early, investing in foster care, addressing root causes, that can help create safer communities, more so than punishment will. And we're also reminded that active citizenship starts locally. Staying engaged, paying attention to local decision makers, participating in conversations, using your voice, even in small ways, it genuinely matters. So here's an invitation on some things that you might want to take to your life from this episode. Practice co-regulation this week, especially when things feel charged. Pause before reacting and notice what your nervous system is doing. Stay curious when you disagree and choose listening over pushing. Pay attention locally. Follow your counsel, engage where you can, stay involved. And remember, leadership is not about position, it's about presence. You'll find links in the show notes to connect with Jenna and explore the resources and pathways we discussed in this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for staying open. And thank you for being a part of this beautiful community. I'll see you in the next episode of Wild Wacky Wonderful Humans.